What if I told you that the voice in your head, the one that criticizes your every move, reminds you of past failures and tells you you're not good enough, isn't actually you? What if that constant mental chatter that feels so familiar is actually a psychological mechanism that you've mistakenly identified as your true self? Today, we're diving into one of the most liberating psychological insights that Carl Jung helped uncover: the distinction between your authentic self and your inner critic. This distinction isn't just academic, it's the difference between living in perpetual self-judgment and experiencing genuine freedom. If you've ever felt trapped by your own thoughts, if you've ever wished you could silence that critical voice that follows you everywhere, this video might be the most important one you watch this year. Because, contrary to what you might believe, you are not your thoughts, and recognizing this truth is the first step toward profound psychological liberation. The inner critic is one such complex, a collection of internalized critical voices that we've absorbed throughout our lives. In Jungian psychology, this critical voice often emerges from what he called the shadow, the repository of aspects of ourselves that we've rejected, denied, or never had the chance to develop. The inner critic uses these shadow elements against us, wielding our deepest insecurities as weapons. What makes this concept so relevant today is that we live in a world that constantly bombards us with ideals of perfection. Social media, advertising, and competitive work environments all reinforce the inner critic's message that we're never quite good enough. The result? An epidemic of anxiety, depression, and self-doubt that affects millions. Throughout this video, we'll explore the psychological origins of your inner critic, how to recognize when it's speaking versus your authentic self, practical techniques to create separation from critical thoughts, methods to transform your relationship with your inner dialogue, ways to access your true voice beneath the critical noise, that feeling of never measuring up, of being your own harshest judge, of feeling fundamentally flawed. These experiences are universal, but they don't have to be permanent. The journey we're about to embark on isn't just about silencing criticism, it's about reclaiming your authentic voice and experiencing the profound relief that comes with it. This voice didn't appear randomly. It formed for specific psychological reasons. Most inner critics begin developing in childhood. As young, vulnerable beings dependent on caregivers for survival, we quickly learn to internalize the standards, criticisms, and expectations of authority figures. This internalization serves an adaptive function. If we can criticize ourselves first, perhaps we can avoid external rejection or abandonment. As Jung noted, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The inner critic operates largely unconsciously, which is precisely why it feels so much like you. It's been with you so long that its voice seems inseparable from your identity. Jung distinguished between the persona, our social mask, the shadow, our rejected aspects, and the self, our authentic core. The inner critic often masquerades as the self, but it's actually closer to a distorted persona, an internalized authority figure that keeps us in line with social expectations. Your authentic self, by contrast, is characterized by qualities like compassionate curiosity rather than harsh judgment, constructive guidance rather than punitive criticism, acceptance of human imperfection rather than demands for flawlessness, a sense of inherent worthiness rather than conditional value. By criticizing yourself first, you attempt to 1. Prevent external criticism by beating others to it. 2. Motivate yourself through fear and shame. 3. Maintain vigilance against potential failures. 4. Uphold internalized standards and values. 5. Protect yourself from the disappointment of unmet expectations. Many people believe that their inner critic is their actual conscience. It's not. Conscience guides with wisdom, not shame. Necessary for motivation, research shows positive reinforcement is more effective. A sign of humility, true humility, acknowledges both strengths and weaknesses. Their true self, it's actually a psychological complex, not your core identity. Unchangeable. Neuroplasticity research proves otherwise. Consider Sarah, a talented artist who constantly hears an inner voice saying her work isn't good enough. This voice sounds exactly like her critical father, who never praised her childhood drawings. Though Sarah is now 35, this internalized parental voice continues to undermine her confidence. The voice feels like her, but it's actually an internalized complex formed decades ago. To help visualize this concept, imagine your mind as a theater. The inner critic is just one actor on the stage, albeit a loud, commanding one who has hogged the spotlight for years. But there are other actors, your creativity, your compassion, your wisdom, who have been waiting in the wings. Our goal is to redistribute the roles more equitably, allowing your authentic self to become the director of this internal production. You're not good enough, you'll fail like last time, etc. In whose voice do you hear these criticisms? A parent, teacher, bully? When did you first begin hearing these messages? What triggers your inner critic to become louder? How does your body feel when the critic is active? Tension, shallow breathing, etc. As Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. When you notice critical thoughts arising, mentally respond with, I see you there, critic's name. I hear what you're saying, but I don't have to believe it. Ask yourself, is this thought helpful? Is it true? Would I say this to someone I love? Continue this written dialogue, allowing both voices expression. 4. Look for the fear beneath the criticism. What is your critic afraid will happen? This dialogue often reveals that beneath harsh criticism lies fear and a misguided attempt at protection. Rather than trying to silence the critic entirely, which rarely works, we can transform how it communicates. 1. Acknowledge the critic's protective intention. I understand you're trying to help me avoid failure. 2. Request a different approach. Could you offer guidance rather than criticism? 3. Reframe critical statements into constructive feedback. Instead of, you'll fail this presentation, try, this presentation matters to you. How can you prepare more thoroughly? Practice speaking to yourself as you would to a dear friend facing the same situation. 4. Keep a compassionate voice journal where you write exclusively from this perspective. Obstacle 2. My critic has been with me so long I can't tell where it ends and I begin. Solution. Start with obvious criticisms and work backward. The thoughts that make you feel shame, inadequacy, or anxiety are almost always the critic, not your authentic self. Obstacle 3. When I try to be kind to myself, it feels fake or self-indulgent. Solution. Self-compassion isn't about false praise. It's about treating yourself with the same fairness you'd offer others. Start small with neutral observations before moving to positive ones. Consider Michael, a perfectionist lawyer whose inner critic drove him to success, but also to burnout and depression. Through the naming technique, he identified his critic as the drill sergeant. By creating this separation, he began to recognize when this voice was speaking versus his authentic self. Over time, he transformed his relationship with this part of himself, honoring its protective intention while setting boundaries on its methods. The result wasn't decreased performance, it was sustained high performance without the emotional cost. Or, take Elena, an artist whose critic convinced her she was an imposter despite external success. Through mindfulness practice, she learned to observe critical thoughts rather than believing them automatically. The space this created allowed her authentic creative voice to emerge more fully. Her work became not only more joyful, but more innovative as she freed herself from the critic's narrow definitions of good enough. What dreams have you abandoned because your critic convinced you they were impossible? What would your authentic voice say about your life's direction if it could speak freely? As Jung wisely observed, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Yet in that acceptance lies true freedom. When we're identified with our inner critic, we often unconsciously project its voice onto others. We assume others are judging us as harshly as we judge ourselves. By separating from the critic, we can hear what others are actually saying rather than filtering it through expected criticism. Become less defensive and more open to genuine feedback. Stop trying to be perfect to earn approval. Experience greater intimacy through authentic self-expression. Recognize when we're criticizing others in the same way we criticize ourselves. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Our relationships often mirror our internal relationship with ourselves. The inner critic often drives career choices based on external validation, security, and avoiding failure. When we create distance from this voice, we can make choices aligned with our authentic values rather than fear. Creativity flows more freely without constant internal judgment. We can take calculated risks without catastrophizing potential failure. Success becomes about personal growth rather than proving our worth. We can receive professional feedback constructively rather than personally. Research shows that self-criticism activates the body's threat defense system, releasing stress hormones that, over time, can contribute to immune system suppression, digestive issues, sleep disturbances, cardiovascular strain, chronic inflammation. From a Jungian perspective, the journey of separating from the inner critic is part of the larger process of individuation, becoming who we truly are beyond social conditioning. This journey has profound spiritual implications. It allows us to experience our inherent worth beyond achievements or failures. It opens us to synchronicities and intuitive wisdom previously drowned out by critical noise. It connects us to what Jung called the self, the organizing center of the psyche that transcends the ego. It helps us recognize similar patterns in collective consciousness and cultural criticism. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Cognitive behavioral therapy identifies critical thoughts as cognitive distortions that can be systematically challenged. Internal family systems therapy views the critic as a protective part that can be worked with rather than against. Buddhist psychology sees identification with thoughts as the root of suffering and offers mindfulness as the antidote. Polyvagal theory explains how self-criticism activates our threat response system and how self-compassion can restore safety. Ultimate goal isn't just to separate from the inner critic, but to transform your relationship with it. Advanced practitioners often discover that 1. The critic can evolve into a wise internal advisor when approached with curiosity rather than resistance. 2. The energy previously used to fight against critical thoughts can be redirected toward creative expression. 3. The parts of yourself rejected by the critic can be reclaimed, leading to a more complete sense of self. 4. The critic itself can be seen with compassion as a misguided protector rather than an enemy. This isn't just a psychological exercise, it's a profound journey toward becoming who you truly are. Your mental talk, especially the critical voice, is not your authentic self, but a psychological complex formed through internalized messages. This inner critic developed as a protection mechanism, but often causes more suffering than it prevents. Creating separation from this voice is possible through naming, mindfulness, dialogue, and compassionate redirection. This separation opens the door to hearing your authentic voice, wiser, kinder, and more aligned with your true nature. The benefits of this work extend beyond your relationship with yourself to every aspect of your life. The critical voices you've internalized throughout your life, from parents, teachers, peers, or society, do not define you. They are simply patterns of thought that you've mistaken for your identity. Imagine for a moment what your life might be like if you no longer believed every critical thought that crossed your mind. Imagine the energy that would be liberated if you weren't constantly fighting against yourself. Imagine the creativity, connection, and joy that might flow naturally when the dam of self-criticism is removed. This journey of separation from the inner critic isn't about achieving some perfect state of perpetual self-love. It's about freedom. The freedom to choose how you relate to yourself moment by moment. It's about reclaiming your psychological sovereignty from internalized voices that never truly belong to you. As you move forward from this video, I encourage you to approach this work with patience and compassion. The inner critic has likely been with you for decades, and creating a new relationship with it takes time. There will be moments when you forget and become fully identified with critical thoughts again. When that happens, simply notice it, create space, and gently return to your authentic center. Remember that this journey isn't about eliminating parts of yourself, but about integration, bringing all aspects of your psyche into a more harmonious relationship. As Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. And that discovery might be the most important one you ever make. Sometimes just naming these false beliefs in a public space can diminish their power. If you know someone who struggles with harsh self-criticism, perhaps a friend, family member, or colleague who is constantly down on themselves, please share this video with them. Sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is help others recognize that they are not their critical thoughts. For more on Jungian psychology and practical tools for psychological integration, check out our video on shadow work or our exploration of the persona and the authentic self. Each builds on these concepts to create a comprehensive approach to psychological wholeness. If you found value in today's exploration, please consider subscribing and activating notifications so you don't miss our weekly journeys into depth psychology and personal transformation. Thank you for your presence and attention today. In a world that profits from your self-doubt, choosing self-awareness is a revolutionary act. Until next time, remember that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. Make it a compassionate one.